Every year, over 200,000 people walk into a recruiting office saying they want to be a Marine. Less than half of them ever earn the title. This is what happens to the ones who do, one rank at a time, from the day they show up to the day they walk away. Level 1. The recruit. You're 18. Your recruiter told you boot camp was 13 weeks. He didn't tell you it would feel like 13 years. The bus pulls onto the depot at 0300, and before the doors even open, a man is screaming at you to get off it. You don't remember his rank. You don't remember your own name for a second. There are 72 of you in the platoon. By week 4, 11 are gone. Not kicked out, gone. Rolled back, recycled, or quietly escorted off the island because their bodies or their minds gave out first. Your senior drill instructor is Staff Sergeant Cordoba, a woman with 11 years in and a voice that never rises above a low, flat warning. That's the part that gets to you. She never screams. She just watches and waits and writes things down on a clipboard you're never allowed to see. There's a recruit named Okafor in your squad bay. Sharp, funny, physically the strongest guy in the platoon. Week 6, during a night movement in the sand pits, he freezes. Not from exhaustion, from something else. Cordoba pulls him aside for 4 minutes. Nobody hears what's said. Okafor finishes the movement. 2 days later, he asks to leave. Nobody stops him. Maybe he was homesick, or maybe he had trauma. Either way, you never find out for sure. You cross the parade deck on Crucible Day, 54 hours with almost no sleep, and somewhere in the last mile you stop thinking about quitting and start thinking about the people next to you instead. That's the trick that gives you motivation. Nobody tells you that going in. They pin the eagle, globe, and anchor on your collar in the dark before sunrise, and for the first time in 13 weeks, nobody is yelling. You're a private now. It's quieter than you expected victory to feel. Level 2. The private first class. You're 19, School of Infantry, Camp Pendleton. This is where boot camp stops being theoretical. You learn land navigation in the dark with a compass and a red lens flashlight. And you learn it because your instructor tells you flatly that GPS batteries die, and the enemy doesn't care about your batteries. Your platoon sergeant here is Sergeant Villanueva, who has 1 deployment already and doesn't talk about it unless you ask twice. He runs land nav drills that don't end until every team makes every point, no matter how long it takes. One night it takes until 0200. Nobody complains out loud. You get your MOS. 0311 infantry rifleman. Some of the guys wanted intel, wanted comm, wanted anything with air conditioning. You didn't. Villanueva tells you that's either very smart or very stupid, and he hasn't decided which yet. You report to your 1st Fleet unit at 29 Palms. Nobody there cares that you graduated top of your SOI class. You're the new guy. You clean the armory. You carry the radio nobody wants to carry. You learn the difference between the Marine Corps that trains you and the Marine Corps that actually runs on people like you, quietly, without much notice. Level 3. The Lance Corporal. You're 20. They call Lance Corporals the backbone of the Corps. And now you understand why. You're not new anymore, but you're not in charge of anything either. You're the one who actually gets the work done while everyone above you plans it, and everyone below you learns from watching you do it. Your unit gets a workup for deployment, 6 months of training rotations, MOUT towns, live fire ranges, a cold weather package that has half the platoon convinced the Corps hates them personally. You're paired with a boot private named Themba, who reminds you of yourself a year ago, and somewhere in the middle of teaching him how to properly zero a rifle, you realize you've become the guy who explains things now. The deployment itself is quieter than the movies, long stretches of routine security work at a forward staging position, punctuated by short bursts where your training actually matters. One night, a perimeter sensor trips. You're on post. It's nothing, a stray animal, but for the 90 seconds before you know that, your hands don't shake and your voice doesn't crack over the radio. Villanueva, back at Pendleton, would call that the whole job in 90 seconds. You come home and nobody throws a parade. Your mum cries at the airport. That's enough. Level 4. The corporal. You're 22. Meritorious promotion board, 3 sergeants and your company gunny asking questions with no clean answer. What do you do if your fire team leader freezes under fire? What's the maximum effective range of the M27? What does loyalty mean when an order feels wrong? You answer honestly. You get the stripe. Now you're a fire team leader. 4 Marines, including Themba, who's a lance corporal now and still asks you questions like you're the same rank difference as before, even though you're not anymore. Leadership at this level isn't inspiring speeches, it's making sure everyone's gear is serviceable, everyone's head is right, and everyone eats before you do. There's an incident during a live fire exercise at 29 Palms. A young Marine in your team has a stoppage at the worst possible moment in the stack. You talk him through clearing it in 4 seconds, flat, calm, low voice, the way Cordoba used to talk. Afterward, he asks how you stayed so calm. You tell him you weren't, you just didn't let it show because that's the job now. Level 5. The sergeant. You're 25. Squad leader. 3 fire teams, 13 Marines, and for the first time, their families are calling you by name when something goes wrong. You attend the corporal's course before the promotion and it breaks something open in you that boot camp never touched. The realization that leadership isn't about being the toughest person in the room anymore. It's about being the steadiest one. Your squad deploys again, a longer rotation this time, embedded with a partner nation training team. Most days are classroom instruction and range time with soldiers who don't speak your language well and you don't speak theirs at all. You learn to lead through an interpreter, through gestures, through demonstration. It's slower and somehow more honest than command through words. One of your Marines, a lance corporal named Osei, gets news his father died back home. You sit with him in a plywood hut for 2 hours, doing nothing but being there. There's no manual for that. Villanueva never taught you that part. You just know it's the job. You make sergeant of the quarter, that cycle. Themba, now a corporal himself, tells you it's because you never once made a Marine feel small for asking a question. You didn't know he'd noticed that. Level 6. The staff sergeant. You're 29. Platoon sergeant, now the senior enlisted advisor to a lieutenant, fresh out of the basic school who knows tactics better than you on paper, and has never once had to talk a 19-year-old through a panic attack at 0300. You become the bridge between what the officer plans and what actually happens on the ground. Staff NCO Academy changes how you think. It's not about tactics anymore. It's about systems, about training plans, about making sure the platoon still functions when you're not standing in the room. You start seeing the whole machine instead of just your piece of it. There's a training accident during a fast rope exercise. Nobody's seriously hurt, but close enough that it shakes the platoon. You run the safety investigation yourself instead of pushing it up the chain because you want your Marines to see you take responsibility before anyone above you asks you to. The lieutenant asks why you didn't let battalion handle it. You tell him because they're my Marines before they're anyone's statistic. Level 7. The gunnery sergeant. You're 34. Company gunny now. You run logistics, training schedules, discipline, and every problem too small for the captain and too big for the platoon sergeants to solve alone. The job stops being about your own performance entirely. It's about whether 4 platoons of young Marines have what they need before they know they need it. You mentor Osei, who's a staff sergeant himself now, running his own platoon 2 units over. He calls you sometimes just to talk through a decision before he makes it. You remember doing the same thing with Villanueva, who retired 2 years ago and sends you a text every Marine Corps birthday and nothing else all year. There's a command investigation into a discipline issue in 3rd Platoon. A young corporal made a bad call under pressure, and it could end his career. You spend 3 days building the full picture instead of the 15-minute version, because you know what a 15-minute version costs a 22-year-old. The captain asks if you're going easy on him. You tell her you're going accurate on him. There's a difference. Level 8. The first sergeant. You're 39. Company first sergeant, the senior enlisted Marine for over 180 people, and the job now lives almost entirely in paperwork, counselling sessions, and conversations you'd rather not have. You approve leave requests. You review every meritorious mast and every page 11 entry personally, because you decided a long time ago that no Marine in your company gets punished or rewarded by a stranger's signature. A young Marine comes to your office not in trouble, just lost, new to the fleet, homesick, considering not re-enlisting. You don't give him a speech. You ask him what he actually wants, and you listen for 40 minutes without checking the clock once. He re-enlists 8 months later. He never knows that conversation is the reason. The company deploys under your watch, and for the first time in your career, you're not the one making entries into a building or clearing a room. You're the one standing at the rear, making sure the ones who are doing that have everything they need and nobody left behind on paper or in practice. It's a different kind of hard. Nobody warns you how different. Level 9. The Sergeant Major. You're 46. Battalion Sergeant Major now, the senior enlisted advisor to the commanding officer, and the weight of the job has stopped being about any single Marine and started being about the culture of an entire battalion. 900 people you can't possibly know, all by name anymore, though you try anyway. You sit in on every promotion board personally. You walk the barracks unannounced, not to catch anyone doing wrong, but because Marines talk more honestly to a sergeant major who shows up without warning than one who schedules a visit. Osei is a gunnery sergeant now, running a company's worth of Marines the way you once ran a platoon. He tells people you're the reason he stayed in past his first contract. You never told him that Villanueva was yours. There's an incident that makes it to the news, a training death during a routine exercise, no misconduct, just the kind of accident that happens in a profession built around controlled danger. You stand next to the commanding officer at the memorial and you say the young Marine's name out loud correctly without a script, because you made it your business to know it before that day. The family thanks you afterward. You tell them there's nothing to thank you for. You just did the part of the job nobody sees. Level 10. The end of the line. You're 55. Retirement ceremony, a gymnasium at Camp Pendleton with folding chairs and a flag folded into a triangle waiting on a table at the front. 37 years. The number gets read out loud and it still doesn't sound real to you. Cordoba is there. Retired herself 11 years now, still doesn't raise her voice above a flat, even register, when she shakes your hand and says she remembers you from the squad bay. You didn't know she remembered anyone specifically. Turns out she remembered all of them. Villanueva drives 4 hours to be there. He doesn't say much, he never did. He just nods once. The same nod from Pendleton 36 years ago, and somehow it still means more than the speeches. You think about Okafor, who left in week 6 of boot camp, and you hope wherever he ended up, it was right for him. You think about Themba, a master sergeant now himself, somewhere overseas training the next generation the way you trained him. You think about Osei and the lance corporal you sat with in a plywood hut for 2 hours doing nothing but being present. You think about the young Marine who nearly didn't re-enlist and did. You spent 37 years learning that leadership was never about being the loudest person in the room. It was about being the one who stayed steady when everyone else had a reason not to. Nobody told you starting out that the job would end this quietly, in a folding chair, in a gymnasium, with people who mostly just nod at you now instead of saluting. But quiet, you understand now, was always what you were actually training for.